Bon dia. Nada, os presento a Guy Davidi. Yo sí que antes de empezar creo que es importante hacer un paréntesis, una anotación, porque creo que la situación lo obliga de alguna manera. Sí que quería decir, y así se lo dije a él, y lo dije también cuando hablamos con la gente del Festival de Cine Judío que están proyectando ahora en la Filmoteca, de que, bueno, me parecía que la situación actual, no actual, porque es un tema que lleva años y años y décadas, que invitábamos a Guy porque, digamos, que su actitud frente a la situación actual y frente al gobierno israelí era sumamente crítica en fin, entonces me parece que era una voz interesante para escuchar. Si su posición, sus películas no hubieran sido radicalmente críticas con un gobierno terrorista, pues no lo hubiéramos invitado porque me parece que no es la situación ahora y para escuchar voces, digamos, oficiales del gobierno israelí. Entonces, bueno, él encantado aceptó, y habéis visto la película y habéis un poco el trabajo que está haciendo también está codirigida con un director palestino, y entonces encantado de tenerlo aquí. Ayer presentó su película en Filmoteca, su segunda largometraje, Inocencia, que en algún momento, bueno, nos pasará algún fragmento también. Hay gente que lo pudo ver ayer en Filmoteca, y los que no, pues hoy tendremos oportunidad de ver algunos fragmentos también. Sí, otra cosa, cuando acabemos sobre las 2, vendrá una persona del Festival de Cortometrajes de Hospitalet a presentar un poco el festival, o sea que si estáis interesados, bueno, vale un poco la pena de que os quedéis para saber un poco cómo funciona el festival y, bueno, un poco la invitación a participar también, ¿no? Y creo que previamente nada más. Él va a hacer la intervención en inglés. Mi inglés es muy macarrónico, pero bueno, Gerard también me ayudará en la parte de lengua, y acabáis de ver también la película, o sea que supongo que es una película que genera mucho debate, y creo que habrá eso, la oportunidad también de que participéis y opinéis y preguntéis, ¿no? Entonces, nada, pues arrancamos.
Hi. Yes. Now. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming and filling the space and watching the film Five Broken Cameras. I will maybe start by just giving some story about how I got involved in making this film, because I'm not. You don't see me. I mean, you can see me there if you really look, but I'm not really there. So it's nice to know how I got to make that film. And I will also share a little bit what came after personally to make that film, and how I got involved in the film that was shown here in the Jewish festival the other day, because I will also show parts of it because I think it's very interesting as well, to get a more deep look into creation of films, and not just focusing on one film, because it's more interesting to see the same approach in different films. I was originally a filmmaker that wanted to make fiction films when I was young. I didn't think I am going to be a documentary filmmaker. I was not watching a lot of documentary films because I have a tendency that I get bored from watching just people. I'm not that kind of documentary filmmaker who's just can open the camera and film and just like whatever comes because I am so involved. I like stories, and I like the creation of stories. And so when I started to make documentaries, it was a big question. Can I make documentaries that will have strong stories in them? Can I find that way of communicating that capacity in me, which is to involve audience through storytelling? Um, Quite when I was young, I had a lot of political interest and questions as an Israeli. I was not a politicized teenager when I was a teenager, but I wanted to, but I didn't like Israeli propaganda and Israeli atmosphere around what it how important military is in society, for example, and things like that. I wanted to make films. I wanted to do, not to be involved so much in politics, but life in Israel, they push you to politics, even just when you have to enroll into the military service. And even if you're not politicized, you are pushed into the politics. They hand you a gun. They force you to be a combatant. They force you to be part of the political reality. And for me, as a person who is quite pacifistic, this politicized me. So when I refused to do my military service, this was not out of a big awareness to Palestine, to occupation that I didn't have when I was young, but it was out of an understanding that this is not who I want to be. I don't want to be a soldier. I don't want to run after people with guns. No, I didn't believe enough in the story of defense, and that is just who I am. I wanted to make films. So the years after I quit my military service were a process of understanding that I have a political, that politics is in me just because of my life decision. I was politicized, if you want, against my will, almost. So after a few first years in my 20s, trying to chase an idea to make fiction films, out of a curiosity, I went to the West Bank, to Palestine, to try and understand who are the Palestinians, what kind of people they are. And I was very shocked from the experience, because I met very generous people, very modest people. They were good to come towards me as an Israeli to understand. They knew Hebrew, many of them. I created bonds with some of them. And that was how I started to become more of an activist, going to demonstrations that you see in Belein, that you saw in the film, and becoming also an activist. And as I was getting politicized, this was the beginning of the 2000s. This was the period where the cameras started to become more cheap and more affordable. I was also a film teacher when I was young. Because I studied film in high school, I had the tools in a very young age. So often I was the person in the activist community that was teaching other activists, okay, this is how you use the camera, but more important than the camera, this is how you edit. This is very easy for activists to, and it's a lovely experience to hold the camera and film a lot of events, and it's important. But to go into the edit room and review this footage and tell something, that's a bigger challenge. That's the writing process in a documentary. So I was very involved in that. And suddenly I was pulled into documentary filmmaking out of that necessity. So a few years passed and I went to Belein, the same period that they start the demonstration. I was already involved at that point. So I joined the village. I started to make a documentary, not Five Broken Cameras, another documentary. And in the night when I was filming, I stayed in the village for a few weeks to make the first documentary in Belein. And at night, the soldiers were coming into the village and they were arresting the kids, as you see in the film. I was the only Israeli there with my own camera, filming my film. And so the villagers were knocking on my door and calling me to come out and help and film. So many nights I was out with my camera filming and often shouting to the soldiers in Hebrew that there are Israelis here. So in many ways, I was also used as a human shield for the villagers there, because they, just the fact that the soldiers hear there are Israelis there and people speak in Hebrew in their own accent reduces somewhat their reaction and the chances of them to escalate, which would mean maybe to kill some people, and which have happened in other places. So during these nights, as I remember in 2005, quite in the beginning, I remember I saw Imad. He was a young guy, not coming from a film background. As you see in the film, he was actually a gardener in Israel for 20 years. He speaks perfect Hebrew. He knows very much about Israeli society. And so we meet in these demonstrations outside in the night or sometimes in the day. He becomes famous around all the video activists because he's there all the time, so he has an importance, and we need to help him to pass him videotapes, DV videotapes back then, to help him with finding cameras that got broken, and so a lot of. So he became he had an important role in the village. So the years passed in Berlin. I was editing my first film, and I hear there was another film that came around Berlin a year after about the movement in Berlin, about the demonstrations, with the leaders of the demonstrations were the main characters. And it was quite successful film. So I think after 2 years, when this film came out, Imad started, as a person who films around, started to have an idea. Maybe I should also make a film, because I see all these international people are coming and making films, and I see all this, the Israeli guy who made a film and that was successful. Maybe I should make my own film. So he walks around with this idea, at least for a year, that I hear about. And it's very hard to think that there can be another film, because there were so many films. There was another film, as I said, was very successful, and what could happen? What is he gonna do? When Phil died, as you saw in the film, someone approaches to him from a development project to make a film about the village, and he decides that the focus now, there is a story. The story is going to be Phil. It's going to be the story of the death of this important person. So Imad films a few interviews with people who are involved who are friends of Phil or his family, to talk about him and how important he was to the village. And he presents this project, and they ask him to find a partner. And he understands he needs a partner because he is not experienced filmmaker. And at that point, he calls me. That was already 2009. So after 4 years of filming demonstrations and events, he calls me to join him. So my first reaction was, Imad, why do you want to make a film together? First of all, I'm Israeli. So everybody is gonna be so upset at you that you choose to collaborate with an Israeli, and you're gonna open this for the boycott movement to annoy you, why you chose to work with the Israeli, and why do you need that? He said, no, but I don't want to work with you as an Israeli. I want to work with you because I trust you and I know you for many years, and that's the reason, and that's what I'm going to say. I said, okay. He convinces me to watch the footage, and I imagine after 5 years of watching this kind of footage, I kind of imagine I'm going to see a lot of demonstrations, and that's, to say the truth, it's quite boring. So he shows me 2 hours of rush footage of demonstration, and within this 2 hour, I see one image, and I've been a lot in Berlin, but this image I haven't been in that event. And you see this old man who's jumping over a jeep to block the jeep from taking someone who is arrested. And I asked Imad, who is this person? And he said to me, that's my father. And he's blocking the jeep because it's my brother who is inside. So it confirms an idea that I had in my mind, that maybe only chance to make a new film about this would be if Imad would to accept that it would be a very personal film that would not be focusing so much on Phil, is not going to focus on Adib or on the demonstration, but is going to be a journey of first of all, of a cameraman. And this was easy to think about because I knew his involvement and I knew what have happened to him and being arrested for his work. but it needed to have more content to be a personal film, and I was curious if there is a chance to do it. So when I saw this image of his father, I started to think, okay, there are many situations because it's a small village and many things are connected to him. And so we have the father. Maybe there are children. Maybe there are the brothers, which I knew are connected, of course. But maybe we can make something more personal. So I come to Imad and I tell him that we can work together on this film. But if we work together on a film, I would like to try to make it as a personal film about you. And you as a cameraman, but you as a family person. And to build a voiceover that is going to make it your story. I felt also that politically there is something more interesting for me to serve as a person that empowers the Palestinian voice rather than creating an objective film about Palestine and about demonstration and focus too much on the fact that Israeli and Palestinian are making the film together. I was very afraid from the Israeli propaganda machine and also the Jewish with that way that would take the film and would highlight the fact that we have made it together and ignore the content of the film. So from that political awareness, I thought that making the film as a personal film about Imad will be directing the audience, but also the way to present the film as a film about occupation and not a film about the collaboration, or that the collaboration will be presented in a more modest way. And this felt to me more honest politically. And in that way, it also served the film. So that was how the project started together. In the coming months of work, my role was, first of all, to try and find, first of all, things that Imad did film that were personal, because he did film things like that. For example, one of the rare things that we found in the footage is this scene where the children are crossing the fence and he films there. So there were scenes that were, maybe he never thought this would become part of a film. Maybe in somewhere in his head, he thought that this could be, I don't know. It's hard to understand, but these were very detailed things, small things that we found in many, many hours of footage. But it was not enough. So when I joined into the project, the focus was very different. Now, Imad was not to film the demonstration so much, but more to film his personal life. So scenes like you saw where Jibril is going to the demonstrations, the scenes with Imad's wife when she pushes Imad to stop filming, scenes of the children is taking a bath, the children going to the demonstration after and not having a night to sleep, filming the child Jibril as he has hard time to fall asleep. So these were not the natural places where the camera was an activist camera would film. It demanded a step further that needed a director's eye to say, now we cannot just focus on what's happening out on the events. We have to direct the cameras to the places that are not comfortable or that are not natural. So, for example, Imad, if soldiers are running around in the village and they are arresting people, I know that your natural instinct and your job is to go out and film it, but I need you to once or twice to decide to stay at home and film what's happening during these moments and the reaction of your family. And that was a first step towards creating the film as a more personal film. The second part of it was crafting a voiceover, and that's another task that was complicated in the sense that Imad is not a natural speaker. He's a very quiet person. And he's not writing. So in order to be able to build it as a personal film, it was a mission to dig out his feelings and his reactions to the different situations and to write them. And this demanded a long time of having conversations together and then trying to write the text for his voiceover, then going back to him and checking if this is something that he feels he identifies with. And so it was a funny role of being a little bit like the French, I forgot the name, the one that whispers in the ear for the hero. Forgot the word. But it was to encourage him to find the language, to write the language sometimes for him, and to see, of course, that what I'm thinking about Imad is actually how he feels things. And that was a challenging process because not everything, some things are interpretation of a character. And this is a choice you make as a director. You interpret someone. So, for example, in the end of the film, when he speaks about healing and their camera and how filming the camera is an act of healing, these are lines that were very poetic. It's my interpretation of Imad. I don't think Imad himself would use that kind of language. But he went through this text and he said, yes, I can identify with that. So that's another part of the craft of making the film as a personal film. And there are more stories around that. To cover my personal story of making the film and how I got involved in it, the film came out in 2011 and was, as you saw, very, very successful. There's a lot of talk around how the public in Israel, of course, react to it, how the public in Palestine and other Arabic countries and in different countries around the world. Then it got an Oscar nomination, and that was also a very big turning point because suddenly the film had a big political impact and created also new enemies in the political domain, which put a lot of pressure on us as filmmakers. And maybe if you are interested, we can talk more about it, but this is not about the filmmaking. I think that's a little bit the beginning of my journey. I will open for one or two questions, and then the way I've structured today is that I have sometimes for questions and sometimes where I give a long talk. So, but not to make it too annoying and just me talking, I will move to give space for one or two questions, and then I will continue on some points that I want to make about the crafting of a documentary, and specifically my approach as a documentary, as a tool to tell stories, and what are the tools for us to tell story when you want to approach documentary as a storytelling film, a film that tells a story. So maybe if you have one or two questions from you, then I could refer to that.
Acabáis de ver la película, la tenéis muy reciente y además creo que es una película cinematográficamente y políticamente como, bueno, que da una barbaridad de juego. Creo entendido que has explicado un poco todas las all the things about the process and the voiceover and the collaboration with the Palestinian director. Por ahí, pues espérate, voy con el micrófono y...
Hi, I'm really curious about what you said about writing the voiceover. How did you approach the conversations with him? Did you have like a starting point, or were just natural conversations? And well, how did you approach that basically?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't think I have a clear memory of the strategy I had, but I can guess that in the first part there were open conversations that we spoke about different things, about how he thinks about different issues. there are ideas that are coming from my own interest, and what I wanted to tell through the film. One of the themes that you can see in all my films, and especially as well in the second film that I will talk a little bit about, is the theme of innocence and childhood. I was very interested in how we as adults are oppressing our children or conditioning our children to live in a state of war. This is the theme of innocence. The second film here is not my second film, but the second film that I would like to talk about. But also this is a theme that I was very interested regarding to Palestinians and regarding their education of the children. So I was really curious on how Imad feels about education of his child, of Jibril. And it was quite challenging because he was not thinking a lot about it as a father at that age, as a young father. So I had to really dig out his different emotions about this subject, and that demanded big conversation and deepening and really to take this out, because he in the beginning he even didn't understand why am I talking about that. And I said, we are talking about making a film about you as a father to Jibril. I want to have reflections about that. How do you feel as a father? And this was really not in an easy sphere for him, because he wanted to talk about Palestine, about the demonstration, about the death of Phil. So it was a long talk to go deeper and deeper into him as a parent. So in that way, some of the conversation were very much led with a purpose, with some kind of an idea that I had in mind, or a question that I had in mind that I thought interest me as a director, but and that I felt is needed and comes out of what he filmed. For example, like, what does it mean to film your father when he gets arrested? How do you feel at that moment? What you're feeling around that? So these are questions that were related to scenes that I felt to be important. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about the footage. How many hours of footage did you have to choose from, and what criteria did you use to select the footage that you did?
Yeah. Imad himself had hundreds of hours of footage that he filmed throughout, first of all, through the first 3.5 years before I got involved, and then throughout the period I got involved as well, a few more. But we also had included footage from other people who have filmed in some moments, and this was important for because it's a big historical event, and Imad could not really film every moment that was there, and some moments were really crucial to the story. So we needed to take these moments, even if it's not him who actually was filming. So this added a few more hundreds of hours of other people's footage. Also, other people that were filming, they had other kind of intentions when they filmed. So it's very interesting to see the different photographers, what interests them. Because Imad was focusing on demonstration, on Adib, a little bit about Phil as well, and of course his personal footage. But there were other people who had other interests. So, for example, my own footage, I filmed the settlements a lot. So a lot of the footage that you see in the film of the construction of the settlements are my footage. Other people filmed the meetings between in the village, like preparation for the movement. So we had some scenes from another photographer who focused on that. So in total, there were hundreds of hours. The way to navigate was writing. And knowing first of all, knowing what are the important events that we want to tell. So the death of Phil, constructing Phil as a character, everyone who had footage around Phil, we brought it to the table. So there was the character, the picking footage according to the character. but also deciding around the events that are important to tell the story. And that reduces a lot of the footage because there's just a lot of demonstrations where nothing big is happening. And so you have a few of those, you don't need more. Also, there's some footage of Imad himself, some that I have filmed in the hospital or when he lays down the cameras and things like that, but also of other people who have filmed him during different situations. So I'm not good as a director and editor. I've also am a co-editor for this film and also my other films. I'm an editor. My weakness as an editor is I have no patience to watch footage. So I let the co-editors to go through all the footage. My method is searching, is kind of knowing what I want to include and searching for it. It works brilliant for some moments, but it's really not enough. It's really good to have a second eye to go through the footage and find things that are not in your head. And in that film, the job of Véronique Laguartsegot, the French editor, was very dramatic to go through at least a selection of footage to see things that we didn't see, that I didn't see in the footage. But you cannot go through all the footage, so you have to do some kind of reduction.
La primera tiene que ver con que en qué momento de la película, en qué momento del film conoces a Emad. ¿Cuándo? ¿En qué momento conoces a él? O si fue posterior. Y lo segundo tiene que ver con que cómo conseguiste financiamiento del gobierno de Israel para poder hacer la película y si crees que vas a conseguir nuevamente financiamiento del gobierno de Israel para hacer la película. Eso, otra película. Eso.
Okay, I will answer that. I met Imad very early. Just a few months after Belin started to demonstrate, I went there to make another film. So I was filming and I decided to move to Belin, to this village. So I spent there 2 months filming another film. And so I met Imad during that period. And when I was editing that film, I also needed extra footage. And so I went to Imad's house. We sat together. In the first, I was very intimidated from him. He's very quiet and he has this suspicious look, very tough. I was very uncomfortable. And there are really other people who makes you feel so comfortable. So it was not easy the first meeting, but he was very generous. And so we sat together the first time, and he showed me the footage that I needed for my film, and I was really impressed on how technically how stable he was in this situation, which I appreciated, but also that he had a real strong aesthetic eye. He could frame, and I have seen a lot of footage from activists and even from young filmmakers that just didn't have the talent to frame. So I saw he knows where to stand. He can be stable, and he also can take the time that is needed to have a shot. So he experimented with some editing at his home. It was very basic, but he had a notion of, he made this short YouTube videos that were just starting. Very basic, but still he could know the basic things out of himself. He never studied of what it makes a good video to be used for something. He filmed for other filmmakers that have asked him for footage. And I guess from what they have selected, he learned what works better. And he did it all by himself. So I was very impressed from that. Yeah, that was very much way before he started thinking of making a film.
Y puede haber eso, sí, el primer part,
Yeah. For Five Broken Cameras, it was some development, not fund, but a development organism already invited Imad to do something with his footage. So when I entered into the project, it was in a very good condition because there was already some kind of interest. So we didn't have a producer. I was supposed to be also a producer. I'm not a producer. It was my second feature film, and my first one was not even yet released. So I was also very young as in my career. But I was very afraid of entering into another. Imad didn't want to have a Palestinian producer. He didn't want to have that. And I didn't want to bring an Israeli producer because honestly, politically, it was so sensitive. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take over this job as a producer, completely without knowledge or experience in that. And so that's how it worked. We had already an interest immediately from some international funds. And I think the Israeli partners, the film fund that supported the film, pretty much in the beginning, first they saw right from the start that there is a big international interest. So this was my strategy throughout my film career, also for the films that came after Five Broken Cameras. You get a big international support, and then they don't like to ignore you because and one head of another film fund, when I made Mixed Feelings, another film I made a few years ago, she told it to me directly. I had come with a Norwegian support, and she said to me, we cannot have you walking around in the world with a film about Israel or Palestine as an Israeli and not have an Israeli finance because it looks really bad on us. So they want to be involved just to do a little bit of damage control for the perspective, for their image. This was, this is half true, and some of them are honestly, they love the film, they feel it's important, and the channel that picked the film in Israel, they are moved from it emotionally, and they are affected by the story and affected by. So they gamble, they take a career risk because they believe in that. And that was very important for my work. It gets harder. First, it gets harder because when Five Broken Cameras gets Oscar nominated, suddenly it's a political issue. Like Prime Minister Netanyahu back then has been calling people, friends in Hollywood, to make sure our film is not going to get awarded. And from the recent 10 years, because of Five Broken Cameras, also because of filmmakers like me have expressed politically in a very different tone than before. For example, I personally support the boycott campaign. I said that I don't come to the Oscar to represent Israel as a country and things like that. That they feel the agreement that they have with Israeli filmmakers have been broken. And this agreement is that we give you money and you say, critique that you have, but you say, but at least we have a democracy, or you moderate your critique. And I think me not accepting to do that, and other filmmakers as well, created a feeling that we are a risk that is not worth anymore taking. So you could see that the film funds that supported Five Broken Cameras has been lost a lot of their finance. And my film after that, Mixed Feelings, had much more difficulties in getting TV finance. And this is just escalating more and more. And I am doubtful that a film like Five Broken Cameras would get Israeli finance today. Should I move for that?
Hi. I wanted to ask you two questions about Five Broken Cameras. First question is, if you have talked with Emad about being there for 5 years in a conflict with 4 children, and if he has asked himself if maybe he could went out of the country, because when you have 4 children, you ask these type of questions, and maybe for the safety of your children. I don't know if he has asked himself these kind of questions. And the second question is that um, the the documentary is all recorded through these 5 years, and it has a lot of critical moments, like you said, the moment of his father and his mother in the jeep, and it's like his figure as a filmmaker and a cameraman is he can't interact with the things that are happening, and I thought this was very difficult, being in that moment and cannot stop your father from being killed, or that could happen something in that moment. So I thought that's very tough uh, for the person, not as the filmmaker. The filmmaker, he did an excellent work because he filmed all. If he filmed the Phil's death, and that's very hard, and he didn't stop recording and go to this moment. That's for the person maybe is the most natural reaction to that moment. And I don't know if you could say something that you maybe have talked with him about these two questions. Thank you.
Yeah. I think Imad is a very, very resilient person. And I think in that way, Palestinians are very resilient people. The amount of trouble they get in their way, the amount of aggressions they need to deal with, humiliations, passing checkpoints, or being checked by soldiers, or experience racism, or the amount is just it's intolerable, and it's very hard to spend time there and to see how occupation is just ruling your life. And the us as Westerners, you as Westerners, but even me, or even Palestinians from diaspora who are living abroad, if we spend a week in their conditions, we would end up probably in prison, or we would end up. We are not used to be treated like that. We are not used to be humiliated like that, and we cannot process that amount of oppression without feeling we have to do something. Palestinians, they are born with that. They get it very early in their life. So resilience is a value, and the ability to be stoic, or to suffer this situation and to endure. That's the word. Throughout this is a key way to survive. And that's, for example, when Imad tells his son, why don't you take the knife and run after this soldier? And he tells them, no, they will come after me. That's it. So and I think as a parent, Imad's education to his children is to be strong, to avoid putting themselves in a risk, and to be patient. He talks a lot. Recently, I have met him recently. He talks more even about patience, about being able to not to explode, not to react, not to jump over the soldiers, because the meaning of it would be devastating and useless. So to breathe in the situation and to take the space of what he can do, and in that moment it was to film. Yeah, the last question. As long as there are questions, it's good.
as an Israeli person. As a Israeli person, and through all these years of violence, occupation land, and conflict, do you think this has a possible solution or ending? And second thing, more with the documentary that you presented yesterday, Innocence, and the subject of the children and the education from where you are born, and you live with all these context and experiences, like the boy, the son of Ahmed. How is it possible a reparation of all these livings from where you are born and this context of violence? Because from our perspective, that we can agree with the Palestinian cause and all these things, it seems like very difficult to see a reparation of or a solution with all these years of violence and injustice. So. And not only a political solution, sino a social reparation, and if children that from the beginning of their lives have suffered all these things, how can they, as an adults, forgive all these things? It's difficult for me to see or understand.
Oh, okay. We are not in the level of forgiving. I start from the end. We are not in the level of forgiveness. It is we are entering to the political discussion, and I will answer about that. But because we are in a very special occasion to talk about filmmaking, I will try after to move back to that. But to refer to that issue, when society is experiencing such a wide amount of violence, then you cannot probably go through the process of forgiveness. And that the expectations of Israel and the way they define to themselves what peace is a misunderstanding of what occupation they are, or what situation they have created, and what are they, and what is Israel, what is Zionism. There is a misunderstanding of that. There is a self-belief that Israel and Zionism is a return to an once owned land, and the rejection of understanding that this is also, at the same time as you could look at it as a return, it's also a violent colonization of other people. So the two narratives, they coexist together. But the Israelis, of course, they don't acknowledge that. So so for Israeli perspective, peace as a country that is born out of military and sustained through military, peace is an agreement that once you sign it, there is peace. And they think for many years, they thought they could do it because the casualties were sustainable by most Israelis. So we're going to make a peace, and then all the violence is going to end. And of course, it doesn't work like that, because when they signed the peace, you had a settler that went to Hebron and shot Palestinians in a sacred area for them, and that was after the peace agreement. And then also, you had the Palestinian bombings done after an agreement signed by Hamas at that point. So you start to think we are signing a peace for whatever this agreement is, or we are going through a process of peace, but we are getting more violence in return. And this is a flawed thinking, because you think that you can just end this amount of trauma and violence by having an agreement, and that's it. And this is not how peace is being built. I like the term building peace, because building peace means you go on a process that is a constant throughout many years. As much as you build protection, or you are building, like when you go to to build your military and your protection. It's an ongoing process, but peace is the same. So it doesn't mean that when you sign the peace agreement that the violence will stop immediately and that there will be forgiveness and that everything is going to be just sorted out. This is a many decades of a process that you have to commit yourself into. So I don't have an expectation from the population to forgive so easily. But I think, of course, it's an important idea to think about what is needed to reach forgiveness, and how to build the conditions for that. But these are the questions that we will have to ask once we have first created the conditions for peace, which means to liberate the Palestinians, to find a compromise, to find a way for them to self-define within a state. So first we handle these issues, we create the conditions for forgiveness. And then we can talk about forgiveness, and that will take us another a few decades. So, if we go on that path right now, maybe at the end of your life, somewhere in your 80s or 90s, you're going to see forgiveness. Maybe then. It's a very long process, but we are not even started that road. I want to go back to some questions that I had to myself in making 5 broken cameras, but also in a sense.
La última puede ser cambiar por así solo. Vale.
Hi. Okay. I wanted to ask a question about the title of the movie, 5 Broken Cameras, and about the motivation of Emad, of keeping on filming. Was it rather a coping mechanism, or was it more like in hopes of showing what was going on in Palestine?
Very good question. And I think it's a little bit of both. I think, first of all, when Nimad started to film, this was 2005, was exactly the years that YouTube started its existence. So you didn't need to be a filmmaker to let the world see what's happening. And that was a big thing. So he was motivated by that. And then he was motivated by that there were some news agencies that were interested in what was happening. So he was filming for the news agencies. And so there was a purpose that was close, and it was not some kind of a hypothetical film that is needed to be done. He didn't know the film circuit. He didn't know about film festivals or things like that. So he didn't have in his mind these kind of possibility. He didn't think even Oscar, what is it? And he had no awareness of these kind of things. It was not his motivation in the beginning, but there were some filmmakers, other filmmakers. So he started to think, okay, there might be something going on there. So that's also worth to explore. So these were some reasons. So it was also financial, to sell your footage to some news agencies in order to make a living. It was very simple in that way. But of course, that this is not enough, because you're really risking your life. You asked about having 4 children, and you're putting yourself at risk. He didn't consider that much. I'm answering you as well because I didn't refer to that, but he didn't think about that so much, I think. His wife was pushing him, as you see in the film. And that's why also after he finished the film, he decided he doesn't continue to make more films because the risk is just getting higher. So he's not filming anymore. But for that period, I think there was a lot of a good, the events, and like Adib says in the film, a demonstration in the village is better than a wedding. It was so much excitement and fun, and you wanted to be there, and it gave him a meaning and a role and a place to find. He's a very, as you see, very reserved person. So he's not the guy who would stand in the front line, and would neither do I. So this gave us a role to function in a reality where we are not naturally the front runner activist for frontline activist. So it gives a meaning like that to be part of what's happening. And later on, as it gets tough and tough, and you think, okay, now it's the time to stop. My wife is telling me to stop. I get arrested once and twice. Why do you continue? Okay, there is a film, but why do you really continue? It becomes an addiction, and it becomes a coping mechanism in that way. So it's a bit of both. The title of the film, Five Broken Cameras, that was... I don't know where I had the inspiration for that. We had another Israeli activist that was photographing in the village, and this guy was just breaking his cameras. They were breaking his cameras all the time, and I was just laughing because I didn't have money for my own camera, and I was just laughing how these guys, where do they find the money to keep their cameras? And so I had this talk with myself all the time around how do they survive? These cameras are so expensive, and where do they find the money to? And Imad also. And so when Imad invited me to act the film, honestly, I had this weird question to him, and because I knew he broke camera, and I said, how many cameras did you have throughout all your work? And then he told me 5. I had 5 cameras. And I said, did you still have all the camera? He said, yeah, I have all the cameras, and also one is still the bullet inside of it. And that's it. That's the moment I saw the film is going to be told in that way, that every camera is going to be telling another part, and that's going to be a line in the film. The title came a little bit after. A lot of people didn't like this idea, so it took some time to convince them. They thought, what is the chapter in a film and a documentary? Some financiers told me, we like the film, but you have to change the name. I said, okay, we will see about that. And then I went to do the trailer, and I went to Imad's house, and we collected all the cameras, and we put Imad with the 5 cameras and took that shot quite early in that process. We were talking about different names. My 5 broken cameras, put some names on a list around different possibilities, and just people saw the name 5 broken cameras, and one person from Netherlands who was another filmmaker said 5 broken cameras. That's the best, from just 5 broken cameras, and that stayed. So that's how the title was. That connects to one of my points here. So maybe I will jump right to it. And the point is that one of the challenges of making a story from a documentary is creating a sense of development. Because, I mean, when you film, you don't know if something is going to happen to your characters, and if it's going to be enough for the character to evolve to some place, and suddenly you have a big story that is enough for 1.5 hours. Basically, when you make a documentary, you can make on anything you want, but after 30 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever or however interesting your film and your space is, the audience start to feel something is what is going on, like what is going to happen. There is a need for a development or for a story to evolve. And either if you don't want to tell a story, you have to establish it very much in the beginning. This film is observation, there's no story, so the audience doesn't have this feeling after 30 minutes or 40 minutes that something has to happen. And maybe it's going to work. But if you haven't succeeded with that, which happens to me often, then you need to start and create a sense of development. So this becomes a big challenge in the way you write a documentary. For 5 broken cameras, the the structure, the putting the opening scene and having the 5 broken cameras just in the beginning, setting up the story. Every camera represents a piece of my life. This was a line that was already put in the original pitch to get finance. Every camera tells a story. And all together, they are the story of my life. Each chapter is a story in my life, and then it created a sense of a structure. You know that you're gonna see story, that is divided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. So, and you know that there will be this. You don't know exactly right in the beginning, but you're gonna discover very soon when the first camera breaks. Then you know, okay, so that is how the film works. That's the way these are the rules of the film. And these are the rules of the film the rules of the film is something that you have to establish quite early in the introduction of the film. So the rules of the 5 broken cameras is that the film is told through the chronology of the cameras. The film, when a camera breaks, a chapter ends. We have a sign that is like a funeral to the camera. This camera worked from this year to that year. That's the funeral of the camera. It's a little bit of a metaphor. A piece of life has passed. This becomes a memory. This becomes a sign of death. Maybe the cameras are representation of parts of us that is dying or something like that. But a lot of ideas on that. But it's clear that after the first camera gets broken, you have now established how the film is functioning. And so you know that there will be a development and that it's going to be related along the repetitions of the cameras that are getting broken. And there are other ways that in 5 broken cameras that you get a sense of development. Of course, you get it from the cinematic tools. You get it from music and from the sound and from the visual work and the different cinematic decisions, but also in the way the story is told. So, for example, having 4 brothers who get arrested one after another. So so it creates a sense of repetition. Okay, another thing is happening. Another thing. It's creates a sense of development. I wanna show. I wanna show the. Can we see minute number 4 in 5 broken cameras? One of the challenges I have in all my films as a documentary filmmaker who comes from Israel and made films about Israel and Palestine is that you don't know anything about Israel and Palestine. So there's a lot of things you have to understand in order to feel the characters, to feel the film, to get the basic knowledge. Sometimes it's not enough. For some people, there's really absolutely no knowledge. I mean, if you go and see a film about, I don't know, the killing in Indonesia, there's a famous film, The Act of Killing, about the massacres happening in Indonesia. I have absolutely no knowledge about what was the context, how that happened. So I have to start the film from the position, if I'm communicating to an international audience, I have a big job of reducing the whole history and the whole context to the most minimal smart way in the introduction of the film, so that you as an audience will have what you need in order to better experience the film, to be involved with the characters and so on. This is a huge challenge of editing, and I always say, when you edit a film, you edit chronologically, start, middle, end, but you always discover the beginning of the film is the most hard part to edit, because you have to set the expectation of how the film is working. You have to set the language of the film, but you have to do that while giving so many needed context and information, and you have to do it in an elegant way that will create a feeling that you're watching a film and not getting a lecture, and not getting just information thrown at you. So In Five Broken Cameras, one of the challenges, one of the ways I wanted to approach it was in this scene, and that's what I would like to show to you. It was important for me to understand that when we enter to the film, we enter in the middle of a story that has a history of land grabbing, of settlements that have been built, and of violence that have happened already in that space, and maybe setting the peace agreements as a starting point where I felt, okay, that's a context that is needed to be established for the film. And there are a lot of little details that are set up for things that are going to happen later in the film. For example, mentioning that the children could, when they were young, the first children, they had access to go to the beach. But the second two children, they don't have access to go to the beach. So getting a context that within this period of the childhood of the four children, something has happened, which for some children, some privilege, it was so basic as going to go to the beach was not allowed already for the two other, which is very small thing, but it's very tragic. And it's a way to understand that these political big decisions have an impact on the personal life of these children, which also is a setup for the very ending shot of the film where we see the two young children are in the beach at the end. So it's a high tech to make a film. It's a puzzle. It's really to find what is the needed information, and what is the most engaging, the most poetic, personal way to transfer this information into the audience in a way that makes them feel connected to this information as a life experience and not just as some knowledge that you are needed to be given. I want to show part of Innocence. Maybe we can see it right from the opening of the film. And I will give a big chunk and I will refer with it also to this subject, but also to the next something that I would like to talk about. Yeah. So I wanted to show you the opening of the film and the first scene, because as I said, this is the hardest part of editing is to start the film. And you need to set up the rules of the documentary. And for Innocence, the rules are very complicated, are almost too complicated for some people. Because you are telling stories of people who have died, who left their diaries. And for some crazy reason, the director wants to tell the story from the diaries without the people that have died. So how do you tell this story? And what's going to be the rules? And I set the rules one time in the beginning of the film with the exposition, with the intro, but it's not enough. You have to show how it works. So you have a voiceover, and you have the current people, living people that are documentary scene that are completely different people. So when we hear Ron, a guy that was a soldier, that is established in the first part of the opening, talking to a young child that is not him, and that's how the film is going. This is the rule of the film. The people from the past that have died are talking to the people from the present that are living. That's part of the story and of the setting of the way the film is going to work. The other thing is that you need to deliver information, and the most needed information for our audience who are not Israelis are that everybody in Israel has to serve in the military for 2 or 3 years when they are 18. And this again is told a little bit in the beginning, but it's not enough. So the way to transfer a piece of information that is just boring like that on a subtitle, on a title, was to let you experience it through the children that are being told, one day when you're going to be 18, you're gonna become you're gonna have to do military service, and so you don't just get this piece of information as that you are needed as an audience, but you get to experience it the way an Israeli learns it in the first time, which is as a child in the kindergarten that is being told one day you're going to become a soldier. So a piece of information like that is suddenly charged with another kind of meaning and creates an engagement and involvement, and also directs you to understand that this is not about that we have to do military. It's about how we are told and how this is coming out throughout the film. It also sets another rule of the film, which is this is a story about growing old. This you get from filming a birth in the beginning of the film. Why you make a film about military service? Okay, the film Innocence is about teenagers who are reaching to the age of 18. All the pressure around their life that leads them to that moment that they are enrolling to the military under so much pressure, and they don't make it. They die. Later in the film, I'm going to ruin it for you. Later in the film, you're going to discover that these soldiers have committed suicide. But for now, what you need to know when you see the film is that they are dead, and the film is about all the kind of pressures that you have. So what does that have to do with birth? But it came to me that if we film the birth in the beginning of the film, then you establish very clearly that this is a film about growing old in Israel as a child. And when you put this in the beginning of the film, you establish an expectation and also a sense of development from a baby to a young child, and you know already what kind of development you're going to expect to get. It's going to be in high school, in school before that, 10-year-old, high school, and then into the military service. I would like to open for a few more questions. If you have.
Ahora. Okay. First of all, in these times, like when you made 5 Broken Cameras, the state of like this conflict was very different, no, from actual times, no, and now I think that people tend to be more radical, and like instead of thinking of peace, they think about the destruction of Palestine or Israel. And I've seen people growing very like anti-Semitic and using like this conflict to like express to express like wanting to destroy like Israel. And I want to question that. Do you think that your movies, do you fear that your movies can be used like as propaganda against Israel, or do you think that you have like that personal aspect that can separate that? Like before, you talked about the Israel propaganda machine and that you didn't want it to like represent that aspect of Israel. And I don't know if you fear that maybe some now people use your movies to say that, oh, Israel is evil, like in this movie, and destroy it. Thank you.
Yes, it's a question. 5 Broken Cameras. I have a story about that. one of the most touching moments was there was a Palestinian prisoner who was writing letters. He died recently, but he was writing letters to an Israeli activist. It became later a very famous theatrical piece, and is a famous. He was a guy who was arrested for being involved in terror. It was never fully proven, so it's unclear. His involvement was there was some involvement, but very non-direct. But he later picked a path of a more non-violent path while being in prison. And one of the letters he wrote was after the prisoners have watched 5 broken cameras in the prison, or have talked about it, or I don't know exactly what, but they have referred to the film when it was, because it was, everybody talked about it back then. And he writes in this letter that these people that were, some of them were there for aggressions or being involved in some kind of violence, they always looked at the nonviolent movement as a very weak and a very one that has no capacity to do anything in that. And suddenly when they saw the film, they understood how strong, what's the strength of the potential of nonviolent movement. It was very touching for me, because for me, the film, you cannot reduce, I think when we offer a model of a joint work of Israelis and Palestinians together, but also in the form of nonviolence, you offer that as a model of resistance for the Palestinians. The Palestinians need to resist in their situation under occupation. So the question is just do you object to resistance? And if objecting resistance is being anti-Semite or being, of course, resistance can be used for propaganda. Yes. But the main thing is that you are referring to a form of resistance that is a nonviolent one, and that could become a model for other people to be involved in. And I felt that if Palestinians or Palestinians in the diaspora pick that path, it's basically still a very positive path, where even if it involves BDS movement, boycott, divestment, putting economical pressure, whether it involves all sorts of resistance that are nonviolent, then I would not define this. Then for me, it's legitimate. Could be in some cases motivated from other reasons. Could be that it's motivated from anti-Semitism. Yes, maybe. But the main purpose of it is that it's a form of a nonviolent resistance. And the more that form takes place, it's a form I believe in, then I think it contributes to peace at the general perspective of things. There are some people who would see the film and would say, oh, it's good that there is nonviolence, but it's also important to have violence. There are people who would see, look, this nonviolent movement, Palestinians have done that for many years and they failed, so maybe we should pick violence. Often I would say to these people that violence in Palestine have never put up an achievement of a land. I mean, the fight is a fight on land. And that's the reality. We are talking about how to get land. Palestinians, in the case of Bilim, have managed to gain the land that was taken from them back after a long process. This is despite it's a few dunams of land, it's a huge achievement. This doesn't happen after a terror attack. This doesn't happen after any other kind of event that is caused by a violent resistance. Hamas actions in Gaza, they are not seen to be working in that direction. Yeah, people talk about Israel. Yes, there are talks about putting pressure on Palestine, but the land, that's what we are talking about. They are losing land right now. So I think it's, for me, the hope was that people would see that despite of the modest achievement that the villages, that this movement has had, it is still a sign that path is working more than what other path could offer. Despite I don't think there is a code or there is a way to ensure that anything would work. But I think there are signs that there are good things happening from that kind of work.
Any?
Sí. Hello. I saw the full movie yesterday, and it was really moving. It was very strong. And since in the movie, in a sense, we're following protagonists who are struggling with joining the army, I was wondering after seeing the movie is what happens if you say you don't want to join the army in Israel. So I think you said you've done the same. So I was asking myself after the movie, because it was so hard for these protagonists to do it, and in the end they don't do it. I was wondering, is it even a realistic option? So is it an option or is it an option? So what do you have to deal with if you say you don't want to join the army?
Yeah. It mentioned a few times in the film, but of course you don't really see it. We hear this Khalil, that one of the characters of the film, when he considers not to do military service, he calls a friend on the phone who is sitting in prison, the military prison, and the friend telling me they are making me, what was it, to collect stones and put them in a pile. So basically you are imprisoned. If you are not doing a military service, you go for, it could be up to a year that you're going to spend in prison for that. This is the path of people who refuse to military for political reason. That's not the path I took. I have gone through through the psychologist path, meaning you try to get a mental profile. Like the girl in the film is mentioning, if I get a mental profile, it will ruin my life. It will not ruin a life, but it's a social pressure, and it's a tag that you get from society for not doing military service, and it's actually not easy to get it for everyone. For girls, it's easier. For me, it was very difficult, but that's an alternative path.
Hi. You mentioned briefly that you wanted to do fiction, but you end up doing documentary. And I would like to understand how you would end up doing documentary. I think you mentioned very briefly at the beginning. And if you consider doing fiction, or you see yourself as a documentary filmmaker today?
Yeah. As I said, I went to documentary out of necessity. I was surrounded by events that needed to be documented. So I felt, okay, I have to do that somehow, because there are stuff going on here that are worth and important to be told. So out of that, what was important for me as a filmmaker, to be able to do a documentary, is that I had a multi-skill as a filmmaker. I was a director, whatever it is, but I could hold the camera. I felt secure with the camera. In fact, I filmed for other people a few times. I had a relatively okay talent for framing. I had a good sense of how to act in the space. I trained myself around that. So I could film situations. I was an editor. I would spend most of my work back with the footage and editing the footage without having finance. So I could also have the sound work for my films. I could also do that. So I could go with a wireless mic. Even for Innocence, a lot of the scenes I was the only person there. Would put a sound microphone on one character, another on another. Now you have a nice setup where you put a wireless receiver on the camera and two transmitters on different characters, and you're all set, and you have the gun microphone on your camera, and you're free. you get the sound, and of course you need to train to be able technically to control everything, to be able to take directing decision while you're busy with technical stuff, and to be able to edit and even produce. As you have heard, I've produced 5 broken cameras, so meaning to be able to write a proposal, to be able to make a pitch, to be able to handle an Excel file for a budget offer that the film funds are asking, to be able to navigate in all the financial process. So I think these tools have liberated me, because I could basically decide what I want to make and just go and start and do it. When I made Innocence, I had all my camera inside a scooter. I would just find a story that I want to make. I needed the help of production to get authorization to film children or things like that. It's not so simple. But basically, I was on the spot. I could do whatever I want, edit with very little money, with very little process on the way that was waiting for someone to tell me, yes, you can make a film. Often I would invest a year of my life without big support of money or with little support of money. It was not meaningful, that was not sustainable, but I could do it without the need to have a person to be hired, without a sound person, without a camera person, I had my own equipment and I could do it. I could make a trailer. I could look at a trailer. It's not good enough. Go and film more, improve it. It's not good enough. Do something. One time I've even recorded, I played the piano. I even recorded the music for the trailer. So I admire this liberty. I mean, and that was a big tool for myself. And I think for a documentary person, that's an important tool. It frees you from the need to get approval and to be so fragile in the process where you're waiting for some film fund to take their time for 4 months and to tell you at the end, we don't like your film. And it gives you a big leverage in front of the other people who are submitting their projects, because when you reach to submit the development, first your writing is much stronger because you have filmed, so you know more where you're going, and your visual material is stronger, your editing is stronger, so you show that you can make it, and you have a stronger pitch and a stronger proposal just for the fact that you were able to do it yourself. So that was how all my films are done. Even after I was able to get finance, even when I made Innocence, I wasted I made the film for 10 years, but the first 2 years was a waste of time because I had in my head that now I'm famous. I made 5 broken cameras. I was Oscar nominated. I got an Emmy. And I said to myself, now I'm famous. I can pitch to all the American. So I wasted 2 years of my life in trying to get finance in order to have a DOP and having a big production value, only to discover that even with all that, I'm still wasting my time. And at the end, I just bought the camera, put it in my scooter and started to film by myself, and went back to the basic of documentary, the most basic, with no budget, with like humiliated, you could say, no big production, no, just going there and starting from scratch again, self-investing. Of course, having a little bit more money in my bank account, little less. I didn't need to work in a cafe or something like that, like maybe when I made 5 broken cameras, or, I had a more convenient starting point, let's say. But the basic was still to go and get and start to do things by yourself. We are running out of time, so I will not move into other subjects. I will just keep it open because we have 10 more minutes. So it's better to just have a few more questions, I guess.
I would like to say thank you for uplifting Palestinian voices and spreading awareness about this genocide, and especially to keeping in the footage Palestinian joy, because I think that is also a big important part of the Palestinian resistance. And I wanted to ask you if you think that as a filmmaker, you have the responsibility of making an approach of this genocide as an Israeli citizen and having, and your poster is like totally opposite to the Israeli occupation.
Yes, of course, I feel very responsible. I don't live in Israel anymore. It's been quite a few years. But I feel very responsible. But it's not the sense of responsibility that motivates me the most. The question is, and I think that's the honest question that every person should ask himself, even activist, is what actually do you want to give? What do you have to give? And what you can give? And not so much about what's your responsibility or what is the right thing or what is. I think Israelis and Palestinians, they are stuck there. No one is going to move. It's not possible. I mean, the only way that something is going to move is annihilation of the other one. And let's face it, if someone is going to be annihilated, it's probably and sadly going to be Palestinians. I don't believe it's going to happen. I'm a very pessimistic person, but this I don't believe is going to happen. So the people are there. They're not going to move. So despite of all the pressures we need to put on the societies, on Israeli society to end occupation and they are the strong side and they need to be confronted globally to a politics of that will create this solution. So despite we need to put a lot of pressure on this society, we also have to contribute that these people would be able to live at one point together. So there's a lot of question of what can I contribute to this situation? When I was there, out of my own curiosity, out of maybe a sense of responsibility, out of many things, I did feel I have something that I could contribute to that. And I was trying to think what I could contribute and how I could contribute in a way that is constructive, that builds a good ground for a change, that builds a good ground of good relation, using film, using creativity, using imagination. When I made Innocence, I also thought that way. I have tried one path of approach, and now I'm trying another way, and I was maybe more focused on Israeli society, less on Palestinians. So I think as a filmmaker, I have a job that is to try what I find to be most feels the most that misses in the discussion is the imagination of what could be. And that is very difficult with documentary, and that maybe is a space where fiction could start and step in. So I'm very hopeful that in the future this would be something I could step into. I think in my documentaries I focused more about what other people have created that I felt needs to be empowered, especially in Belen, but also with these teenagers who have committed suicide. Despite of the tragedy of that, I felt their voices needs to be amplified, to be heard, and to take space. So I felt there is something I could do there. I don't think a responsibility is enough. You have to find what is your role in that, and if you have a role, and if you don't have a role, it's you can do other things also.
Hello. So earlier you mentioned that when you were making Five Broken Cameras, and you were a little afraid of your partner having negative reactions from his fellow Palestinians. I was wondering if you ever felt like you could also receive backlash, or how was your experience in your Israeli circles, in Israeli society? How did you feel like it was going to be received, and also Five Broken Cameras has had like a very big impact internationally, I think, in people's images of this conflict. How do you think it has affected Israel? Like, what do you think the response was to your documentary?
Not me and not Imad. We didn't know to what level Five Broken Cameras could go. So, what kind of reactions and what it could do. I mean, I when I sit in front of material and footage, I believe in the strength of it, and that what excites me, and I see the potential for a personal transformation after watching a film like that. And that's what motivates me. But I don't think on the overall so much about how the society is going to react. And I'm really focused on the emotional capacity that a film could make over people. And I only see that almost. So of course, when the film comes out, if I book in cameras, especially when it gets nominated, there was a big backlash but not because of the film. It was because there was journalists start to try to look for titles. So they start to get interviews and dig out pieces of information, and suddenly you find a line you said to be the head of the title of a newspaper or something like that. So you feel suddenly you're in the public debate and you don't have control over this debate. So you're starting to calculate your media presence and if it's worth or not. It reached to a point where they made in the primetime television in Israel, they have made a half an hour a research into how Five Broken Cameras was done. I think no one received such a treatment to have in their primetime half an hour that was just discrediting the film. That was the point. And it got such a good time in the commercial channel that a documentary film could only dream of. Our film was not scheduled in that good time. So discrediting the film had probably more success than the film itself. It had a big impact because I think up until before, Israelis never get to spend time with a Palestinian perspective in that, with this voiceover, with all this experience that you've seen, to spend 1.5 hours, or in the short version, the 50-minute version, to spend that kind of time in primetime TV. And the primetime TV airing was only done thanks to the Oscar nomination. So the success of the film abroad made the debate come and become really serious in Israel. And that's really only thanks to an Oscar nomination. Only a film that gets that kind of acknowledgement can have an impact on debate. Innocence doesn't have, it was nominated in Venice, but this is just not enough to affect a real a shift on the debate. So there was a rare chance where I think Israelis as a society were faced by a choice after being exposed to such film. And, of course, there is a limit to what a film could do. But I would say this was an opportunity that was handed to a population to see, hey, there are people there who are fighting for their cause, fighting for the liberty, but they are open for Israelis. They are... one of the main figures who get killed by an Israeli is the one who says, "You are our brothers, come and join us. Don't come into the village, we will not attack you." They are our friends, the Israelis. So there is a message that has a big hope in it if you accept our resistance, if you pick our path, and if you listen to us. And I think Israelis at that point decided not to listen to that. And sadly, it gives, of course, the violent path some validity, sadly, because they can always say, with a big reason in it, that there has been an open arm on the other side. There has been a Palestinian Authority. There has been a movement that was open for building some other kind of future, and this was ignored. So that was, I think, the impact of the film. Personally, it was very destructive for my career in Israel because I was marked. Everybody was afraid of financing my films. For my next films, I had a much harder time than before. And also my colleagues were not so happy from some of my expressions because they meant a lot of more pressure on film funds and on television. So I don't live in Israel anymore. My finance is shifted to be more related to Israel, to abroad, but that's but in Israel it became very difficult for me to continue and work. It's still possible, but it probably will close down even more very soon. Oh, last question. I want to say that, by the way, if you want to watch Innocence, whoever of you have Movie Star, I think the film is accessible through Movie Star. So search for it.
Okay. Hey, I don't know if you already told us this, but I wanted to ask, why did you choose to make the movie about the Palestine side? Because as we know, Palestine and Israeli are in conflict. So my question is, if you have done another movie that it's from the point of view of Israeli, and why did you choose to make it about the point of view of Palestine instead of Israeli? That's it. Israel.
You know, before I'm an Israeli, before I'm an Israeli, first of all, I'm a filmmaker. It's actually an artist, I would even dare to say. For me, this is a big thing, is a bigger thing than to be Israeli. I get excited from finding a story that touches me and that I think I have a special way to tell it that no one else has. It's a secret. I love this process when you make a film. You have a secret that no one else knows. It's a way when you're sitting in the editing and you're connecting moments together and putting some music and a voiceover that you came up with or that you found or a piece of archive that you found. And in a sense, that's beautiful. If you see it in Broken cameras, digging out, suddenly finding a little moment where Jibril lifts up the olives back to his hand, or that you find I don't know, a little idea of what happens if we write something about the bathroom and about the skin of Jibril that is so delicate and that is so fragile. So an idea comes like that, and you feel we're going to see a Palestinian child in the bathroom being watched, and that's going to touch someone. And so it's like a secret that you are. I love this process of crafting a film, and so it's. That's the first thing, is that I have an interest in telling stories that I feel are secret, and I'm going to bring them to light. And as an Israeli, because I am Israeli, as an Israeli, the Palestinian experience has been distant for me, is inaccessible for me. So for me to go there and discover it and reveal it and expose it to people like me was a very exciting thing. And that refers to the question of responsibility that I a little bit put aside. I don't think responsibility is enough to make films. I think you have to really feel a joy from the process and excitement from that. And as a young filmmaker, my first two films were done in Palestine, not in Israel, because I was not excited from anything in Israel. I was not ready for that, maybe. But meeting the Palestinians just caused something, and curiosity and an interest and some drama that I felt. It's a political thing, but it's also just intuitive or intuition or yeah. So thank you very much. It was really lovely to talk about my work.